there, buttercups. Your resident Teabelle here. Welcome to Hark, 'tis the Teabelle. Let's dive in for that tea today, huh? Now, I know that we were going to talk about Benedict and Sophie, and they are the majority of this episode, I promise. But there were some loose ends that got tied up in the last half of the season for Bridgerton that are, well, they play very well into this week's episode. Okay, so we're gonna mention some of those loose ends being tied up, and if you haven't seen the whole season 4, you don't want to listen to this until you do. I promise. Okay, but let's get on with it. The moment after the waiting. Now, essentially, next comes the whiplash of fulfillment after all of that longing we've been feeling. And it's strange. Sometimes to get what you want after you've been waiting for what feels like forever, and it feels like we're more vulnerable, doesn't it? Now that we've gotten what we wanted, we have to examine the difference between the imagined connection and the realism of it all. Basically, fantasy versus being the lived. It also highlights the shift our nervous system may experience. The anticipation which heightened our arousal is now leading to the resolution of it all. Basically, regulation. Now, everyone has certain scenes they rewatch more than the happy endings that they lead to. And this is where we grieve the loss of the what ifs and the boundaries that are placed now because of this completed arc. Now, let's look at Mama V and her late in life gardener, Marcus Anderson. Now, if you haven't watched the whole season 4, you won't know everything that we've seen yet, but in the beginning of the season, he's allowing her to set the pace because it has been a very long time since she's even been interested in another man, right? And that's fair. She had a love match. Everybody knows she had a love match because look at her, like 8 kids. Not to mention that 5 of them, because Eloise is not in a love match yet, have found their own love matches, right? In a society where you regulate I don't know, money match, the power match, the political matches. But I digress. Marcus Anderson. He is a man who waits patiently. He is a man who supports her, and he makes sure that she's comfortable. He thinks that she doesn't want to formalize their agreement. And so when she asks him, well, it doesn't seem like you want to continue, he basically tells her, if I felt like you didn't want to, I would love to formalize this essentially and be, your acknowledged partner. And that to me says so much because these two people who have loved and lost now see each other in a way that they're not just a father or a mother, a sister or a brother. They're essentially two people, a man and a woman, wanting to be with the other. And that's amazing to me because Mama V, who essentially gave up on finding love, found somebody who cares for her. Well, we go through this whole thing because remember, the thing is that he says, okay, we're betrothed. Fantastic. And then she's like, can we just wait to tell the kids? Yeah. Well, because poor Francesca is widowed and she doesn't want that happiness to overshadow everything. Because poor Benedict is in the throes of trying to find his lady in silver, trying to navigate how in the world he can be with her, considering that it's, almost impossible because she's just a maid, right? And eventually, eventually it comes down to Mama V realizing that this man has stood through all this, and that's wonderful. He would make an extremely great husband, right? The problem falls really and truly in the space of, during this whole thing, trying to help Benedict find Sophie, trying to help Benedict in everything he's doing, she realizes that she has more in common with Benedict than she remembers, because she used to be just like Benedict, impulsive and carefree, wild, basically the rebel of the group. But she forgot all of that. She fell in love, and all of that quieted down, and she was a wife, and then a mother, and then obviously someone in society who was very much respected, right? That being said, she didn't want to give that up just yet. She saw a version of herself that she lost that she would like to get back. And at the end of all of this, right, he suggests, hey, Benedict's good, Francesca's better, everything's kind of calmed down. Maybe we should tell your kids about our betrothal. And she kind of stops him and says, well, it's not the time. And she's delaying, and he kind of catches on. And if she had wanted to be formalized and be a wife and continue to be in the role she is, it probably would have worked out between them. But she realized that she wanted to try and find the carefree, little more impulsive, fun version of herself that she lost long time ago, right? Now, I know I had so many what ifs for this pairing, because Lord Marcus seemed absolutely perfect for her. He wouldn't replace Edmund. He would not step up and take control of her life. He would simply complement it. Now, we have limited our possible what ifs because now essentially their betrothal is gone. He doesn't want to linger with uncertainty anymore. He cares for her very deeply. In fact, I do think he loves her. But she's not ready to give up possibly finding that version of her that she lost when she married Edmund and became a mother to 8 children and essentially lost herself. So when this all happens, we grieve that loss of the what ifs. And the boundaries now are placed on the possible possibilities, right? When something you had been waiting for and wanted deeply finally happened, did it feel explosive or quiet? In my opinion, in my very humble opinion, I feel like Mama V felt a quiet devastation because she had to choose between either a man who would stand by her, but she had to be the same person she is now, or trying to find out who she was outside of marriage and motherhood and society. We all love Mama V nonetheless, but it is a little sad to see her lose such a man, but I can understand why she would choose to stay independent. And I won't lie to you, this seems a little reminiscent of Benedict until he met his Sophie. In our last episode, we discussed dopamine as the chemistry of anticipation, the fuel for the pursuit of your desire. We've also learned that uncertainty fuels the anticipation. It feels romantic to feel the chaos of anticipation. The uncertainty of it allows the possibilities to positively soar. And it's exciting because it can be anything in this phase. But here's the twist. Dopamine spikes more during the pursuit than the possession. When you receive what you desire, it feels stable. It can feel like trust. It can feel safe. And when you receive all that, it's almost like you're home in some cases. And that was the case for Francesca and John. Remember, Francesca and John were very much the quiet pair. The ones who wanted to just skip balls and stay home and just be together. They didn't need the loud, exciting nightlife, right? Now, things can come in and cause, how can I say this? I, they can cause some issues, but they can be well meaning issues, right? So earlier in the season, in the beginning of the season, we saw Francesca and John coming through and staying in London, and Francesca enjoying the quiet, right? And sometime in the middle of the season, Michaela, John's cousin, just pops up in London. And Michaela is the opposite of Francesca in what seems like every way. She commands the center of a room and she does not flinch. She's loud and unapologetically herself. Now, there's nothing wrong with being that way, not at all. But it does have a tendency to undermine what her and John have built, the structure they've built in their life, the routine, everything they do. And this, you can see the cracks forming when Francesca has to finally, how can I say, confront the issue. And there's just one special evening where it's very late. It's probably 2 a.m, and she comes in and she sees John and Michaela sitting in front of a fire, and they're just reminiscing, talking about everything that I guess cousins talk about. And John fears that, oh, we were so loud that we kept you awake. And Francesca just kind of quietly says, well, it's late and we have breakfast at 9:30 in the morning and it's 2 o'clock now, and you should probably go to bed. And Michaela, although I think she has good intentions, continue what she says allows the cracks, if you will, to continue to form, right? Because she basically suggests, oh, don't worry about it. Well, I'm sure we've kept everybody up. We'll just, break fast, a little later and all that. And Francesca now uses her very firm, no nonsense voice and says to let her know, like, that would be very rude to our cook who will be up at 6 in the morning. And now John can see Francesca's upset. Okay, very upset. And he says, you know what? I'm just going to go to bed now. Because he's understanding that this is upsetting his wife, the one woman that he chose, right? Now, don't get me wrong, he loves his cousin. They grew up together. They're like best friends, but he didn't really choose her in the sense of choosing her because obviously they're cousins. He saw Francesca and chose her, so he's like, you know what? I'm gonna go to bed. And now this causes a little bit of an issue between Francesca and Michaela. And you can see everything continuing to detonate a little bit as they continue. And here's the thing. I feel like you can see the competition of Michaela's extrovertedness versus Francesca's introvertedness. John needs both of them because that's, how he, what he needs. But Francesca already feels inadequate, doesn't she? They haven't been able to have a baby. What's wrong with her? Because look at her mother who had 8 children. Everybody else has had kids. Why can't she? Now, as the season continues, you see John not feeling well, having headaches, feeling stressed, and so it's kind of almost a foreshadowing, unfortunately. And there's one specific evening where the Michaela wants to hold a soiree. Now, Francesca would much rather be at her sister's recital, but she's hosting the soiree that Michaela wants to throw. And she really just, I think, hits her limit with it. And Michaela also does too, because they don't understand each other. They don't talk about the issues that are at hand, the elephant in the room. But when they finally talk, they come to an understanding where it's just easier for them to be friends, right? And so they become friends, and eventually, her, John, and Michaela complete a puzzle they've been working on. And there's one piece left, and so John and Michaela put that puzzle piece down together. And John says, I'm going to go lay down, wake me up before dinner, I have a headache. That's it, y'all. That's the end for him. Because Francesca goes, happily at dinner time to go wake him up. And he doesn't wake up. And so this blood-curdling scream could be heard. And when it's revealed that John has passed away, I'm sure everybody had some form of sadness, right? Fans alike, the show. And so she lost her grounding. She lost her home in that sense, right? Or so we think. Because she wants to feel that she's pregnant. She really does. But when the House of the Lords representative comes by and says, well, we got to do an examination, Bridgerton, our Bridgerton second son, Benedict, is like, we're the Bridgertons. You should trust us. And Francesca is understanding in that moment that they have to do it. And they find out the unfortunate news that she is really not with child. And this kills her because it didn't matter. She wanted a little bit, something left of him, but she also needed a reason to be calm. Now, eventually, she does express why she feels she's been so terse, has had so much tension, right? But throughout this time, her and Michaela have had almost a very unsteady friendship, if that's what you want to call it. And eventually, it turns into understanding from each other. Michaela is on the outside looking in and finally understanding why Francesca feels how she feels, right? But the point of everything I've just said is that at the end of it all, it was a quiet transition. As you can see, Francesca finally balancing herself out and being who she was before all the stress and everything and all the extra feelings she was feeling. And you can see Michaela change her own way. But what that question is, because we said that when you receive what you desire, it can feel stable. It can feel like trust. It can feel like being home, essentially, right? Well, she was home with John. And eventually, after losing John, she had to adjust to a new normal. And we have to remember that transitions can feel quieter than we expect because the nervous system is relaxing. And the question isn't will they, it's now what. But when you look at Michaela and Francesca, right, the question now is, what is that subtle shift that we're seeing? Because there are many subtle shifts. And the question is, Francesca had requested that Michaela stay. She didn't want to be by herself. She wanted something to remind her of John, right? But Michaela, who had said she would stay, who looked like she would stay, packed up and essentially left without telling Francesca. Why? What would convince someone who's already said they would stay to leave so randomly, right? And here's where we still retain some of our what will happen abilities, our, the possibility of what we can now just to talk about it, right? But that doesn't mean that they're unlimited. Well, I might be wrong. Because remember, Francesca finished her arc with John. Now she's right back in the middle of an arc with Michaela, right? So this girl jumped from unfinished to finished to in between again. She's just a jumper, I guess. But the basic point of this is we now get to ponder the now what part of it all. All right, so when the story completes itself, the speculation has now quieted, right? The stimulation is lost, and we sometimes resist resolution because there's a fear of what we gained or arrival anxiety. Escape routes are gone, and essentially commitment is clarifying, and we realize the idea of possibility is intoxicating. This shows itself in the journey that Lady Danbury takes in season 4. Okay, now she has been a part of the ton for many, many years. She is essentially the best friend and probably closest person to the Queen, besides Brimsley. And she wants to go home. She wants to take a little break, right? And so in the beginning of the season, she asks the Queen to allow her to leave Mayfair and go home. And the Queen instantly says no. And in the way that only Queen Charlotte can, really. And the thing is that she is fearful. The Queen is fearful because there's only one person in all of Mayfair, in all of London, in her life that she can go to and she can just be Charlotte. And that's Agatha Danbury, right? Now, and I say this lightly, but yes, she's a queen, but she also is in the process of losing her best friend in her mind. She is also now, she found out who Lady Whistledown was, but at the same time, that Lady Whistledown wants to stop producing Lady Whistledown gossip, right? So now the Queen is losing two of her favorite things in the world, and she just doesn't know how to handle it, right? And for Lady Danbury, she is not looking at this as if she was just a subject of Queen Charlotte. She is the best friend of Queen Charlotte. So she thinks that, well, she hopes that she will consider not as a point of view of a subject, but as a best friend to allow her to get this respite, right? And here's the thing. It takes her a while, but the Queen sees that the effort Lady Danbury is putting in to help her cope while Lady Danbury's gone, right? And how does she do that? Well, Alice is a wonderful woman, and her husband, the former boxer, they have come up in society, but Alice and Lady Danbury are very much alike. They're very similar. And at first, Alice is a little resistant to wanting to be a lady in waiting to the Queen, which I don't blame her. But eventually, she understands that the Queen really, yes, she's difficult, but she's difficult because she is a woman of power and she doesn't know who she can trust and who is coming to her just to get her on her good side or actually be a person she can trust, right? So now she's losing that stimulation, if you will, because that's what happens. But then she realizes in her lady in waiting, Alice, that she's not going to lose that stimulation, is she? Alice still has a part in helping Sophie and Benedict be able to be together, right? And then in the end, the queen isn't sure if her plan worked because of the plan itself or that there was really a lack of a plan. She's impressed, okay? So here's the thing. The queen now gets to have more speculation, okay? The queen now has stimulation because Alice is going to give her that stimulation, even though Lady Danbury is not going to be in Mayfair. And Lady Danbury has plainly told the queen, I am going to write to you. I'm going to miss you. I will be back. And in that time that she's gone, the queen is not really losing anything. She's just needing to adjust. And even though she is going to adjust because we know that she is the queen and she is a bold woman who will do what she has to do, she still had to have her tantrum first, which I very much understand, unfortunately. All right, so we often imagine resolution as more explosive, right? Fireworks, if you will. But psychologically speaking, fulfillment feels softer. Anticipation is infinite, whereas reality is very specific. When Sophie steps fully into her place, not hidden, not masquerading, not suspended between identities, possibility collapses into choice. And when Benedict finally chooses Sophie, not as a fantasy, not as a projection, but as reality, he is going from craving mode to attachment mode, right? And choice is intimate. Let's be very honest. The fantasy is dissolving, real life is beginning, and this all is not a loss. It is a glorious transformation. Because throughout the series, Benedict Bridgerton has lived in liminal space. He was the second son, the observer, the artist hovering between freedom and expectation, right? He was the one who idealized. He was the one who chased inspiration rather than consistency. And he had lived in the shadows of his brothers without knowing who he truly was or what he really needed or wanted. And his artistic tendencies are both a good and a bad thing, a gift and a shield, if you will. Artists often romanticize longing, but creation requires commitment. This is something that Benedict has been avoiding since he learned that Anthony essentially had paid for him to get into art school. He wanted to get into art school for his ability, not because his brother paid for it. And that's how he was seen. He was seen as a buy-in, not for the talent he had, which he was talented. It would be easy to imagine that he doesn't know his role in the family or life because he doesn't know what his purpose is. And it's easier to float aimlessly among everything than to commit to anything or anyone. And you can see this after he leaves the art school and romantically, in quotation marks, floats. And he romanticizes the experiences he feels as he flows through this phase. So essentially, like, he doesn't want to commit or settle down because he isn't sure where he needs to be, if he has a purpose, none of that. Nobody seems to need him in the way that he feels that he should be needed. And in season 4, you see him start changing. That masquerade that he's been avoiding, well, certain things like society, and he meets Sophie. And the fact of the matter is that is the beginning of the end. Now, in the season 4 conclusion, he does something extremely profound, especially for him. He chooses. It's not the idea of love. It's not the aesthetic of desire. It's not the mystery. He's choosing Sophie. He's choosing to love the woman rather than the muse. He's choosing to collapse into reality after vacation and fantasy, and he's sacrificing ambiguity. Right? He was a rebel. He wanted freedom. He wanted to be able to be impulsive without having it affect anybody, really. And He's moving from the life of freedom to one of responsibility. He is learning to become emotionally accountable, right? And he's achieving true artistic maturity, which is integration. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes the bravest act is not falling in love, it's staying in love. And that is very difficult. You have to continually choose that person day after day. You have to see everything about them, good, bad, the ugly, the not ugly, everything, and still choose them. Now, his choice marks the end of an internal arc. From detachment to devotion, from observer to participant, from hovering to landing. This artist that we know as Benedict Bridgerton stops circling the canvas and he paints. And Sophie, whoo, that girl goes from survival to safety. Look at her. Sparkle. Her arc is just as equally powerful, though. Now, her story begins in concealment. She's invisible. She's self-protecting. She experiences conditional belonging. And she's living under an imposed hierarchy. She's conditioned that in order to belong, she must meet certain conditions. And she hasn't been able to experience unconditional love and all it has to offer. And yet, by choosing the Bridgertons, she's going from 0 to 100. And y'all can't fight me on that. Her journey isn't simply romantic. It's existential. It's a performance of survival. Everyone has desires. Don't let them tell you otherwise. And even this hyper independent lady has it. She wants to be seen and remain safe. She wants to be chosen without disguise. She wants to be loved without erasure. And when Benedict recognizes her, truly recognizes her, it resolves more than a love story. He's resolving identity fragmentation because she doesn't know who she is either. She's lived a life of being told that I can only love you if you do this for me, and being told she isn't good enough, even though she is more than good enough. And honestly, let's be honest, there's so many other fears she could be feeling. This love could threaten her protective identity. In the beginning, she is Sophie, the maid, right? And she feels like, and she could feel like, really, that if he really knew who she was, he wouldn't stay. Because look at the past of her mother, right? Now, the terror of removing the mask she was so carefully cultivated over time is absolutely real. Because in the way she has protected herself is being just a maid. Just a wallflower. And we all know why wallflowers are protected. Let's, circle back to Penelope if we need that. And truthfully, it could expose the imposter syndrome she feels and the attachment wounds she has. Because let's be honest, she could, looking at her father did love her. We know he loved her. But that woman he married, that's what I said what I said, made sure that she suffered. Now, psychologically, this is movement from survival mode to a secure attachment. Because with Benedict, she is no longer hiding in someone else's narrative. She's standing in her own. She is being chosen without disguise. She is a partner when it comes to the social risk being shared. And let's talk about that social risk. Social risk. Okay? Y'all, I think that when Mama V essentially sits, let me preface this. When it comes to Mama V, she is essentially thinking that Benedict is just in one of his dalliances, right? A flirtation, if you will. And she doesn't realize that he loves her, which, given his recent past, no one can blame them. And I don't think he can either, right? But he told her, look, I love her. And when Mama V realizes that it's not just a dalliance, she has to reconsider everything that she knows about herself, about her child, and about the fact that love is love. So when she comes to him and basically says, "Look, I love you. I'm always going to love you. You're my son. But if you marry her, you have to understand that you're going to have to live in the country permanently. You'll be disgraced. We can't really talk to you, but we'll still love you. We'll still try and see you. We'll support you." She's essentially saying, "You're going to be ruined, but we're going to love you anyways." And how do I say it? He takes that into consideration. But something else to be said. Y'all, when Mama V finds someone that she cares about, she is the mama bear that you do not want to fight. And y'all can't argue with me on this one. Not one bit, okay? Because what does she do when they find out that Sophie's been arrested on false accusations? Not only do they go and defend her, they go into action mode. Now, remember, the only reason. Now, this is where also relationships come into play, if you recall, because Lady Danbury is Violet Bridgerton's best friend. She's also best friends to the Queen Charlotte. Now, who does that lead to? Lady Alice. Hey, she's the new lady in waiting, right? And she is also friends with Lady Danbury. Now, where does this all lead? Because Lady Alice concocts a plan, okay? She gets the Queen to actually reconsider everything, but before she does all that, she manages to help sneak in Sophie to the Queen's ball, which, by the way, is honoring Lady Danbury. That's a huge thing. And then so that's where Mama V and Benedict and Sophie take on that woman about everything that she's stolen from Sophie. Okay, what'd she steal? Well, turns out in the will that her father left, she, Rosamund, and Posey had 18,000 pounds for each of them as a dowry. Now, tell me why Rosamund, the favored daughter, only has 36,000 pounds to this fortune hunting jerk who's going to dump her, and Posey has 18,000. Right? Now, this shows us that the girls are not as bad as their mother. Not at all. Okay? Posey is honestly the sweetest. She literally is just there. Rosamund is kind of like her mom, but still has a chance to, I don't know, fix things. And Araminta, I named that woman. I know I shouldn't have, but that woman is trying to fight a losing battle. Her reputation is in shreds. Not to mention, like, nobody likes her. So you go try and go up against a Bridgerton. And so, essentially, when the Queen is summoned, they fix the whole situation, right? Now, this allows Benedict and Sophie to marry, okay? And this allows them to be together. What that tells me is that Benedict, who was running from everything, stood up and fought for this woman. He loved her, he fought for her, and at the end of it, that is what he was here for. You can't tell me that love doesn't change people because, well, let me rephrase. Love doesn't change people. Love changes the plans they make and the tactics they take. Okay? Now, we see in all of this that Sophie moves from self-protection to self-expression, especially in that interaction between Team Bridgerton versus Team Penwood, right? And then she moves from survival to stability because she is in a family that offers unconditional love without even having to think about it, right? Now, why do I say that? Do we remember that the reason that Benedict survives is because, remember when he's injured on the way from, protecting her at the house in the country, she helps take care of him so he recovers, right? Well, when Mama V is like, I don't need any more help, But when Benedict is saying, "Mom, I was injured. She took care of me. Like she didn't have to. She could have." And Mama V immediately says, "You know what? You took care of my son. Come on, I got you." This is unconditional love, and that is stability. Sophie is not a damsel to be rescued. Never. She is a woman recognized now. She made the choice of being with a man who had was continuously trying to prove to her and himself, but I think equally to both actually, that he cared enough that he would do what he needed to do for them. And here's the thing. I love the idea that she goes from being a what not to a definitely. Because she's not important in the beginning as society sees her, but Benedict sees her as she is, and she sees him as he is. They are seen, and that's something they both really, really need in their lives. Okay, so we all have to wonder why closure feels different than we expect, right? And even in the happiest of endings, there is still a quiet grief in endings, right? When an arc closes, the speculation ends, the what if is dissolved essentially, and the infinite narrows into memory. And fear no longer dictates choice, and value aligns with action. We see how identities consolidate in that. And when it comes to Benedict and Sophie, Benedict finally figures out how to evolve as a partner as well as an artist, whereas Sophie evolves into someone who belongs but also still keeps her independence. And yet, closure does something anticipation never could. It integrates. The nervous system settles, the tension releases, the liminal space resolves into structure. And this makes us feel some type of way. We can feel satisfaction, emptiness, relief, and nostalgia. This ending, the end of an arc, reminds us safely that our own life chapters are closing, right? And we move from obsession to stability, from fantasy to foundation. The fantasy that a dance floor allows us is irresistible at first. It allows our identities to be suspended. It is simply electric and it's liminal energy. However, the marriage and home that would be built would evolve the structured identity, the structure that would hopefully build a foundation of happiness and stability. It's extremely grounding in its domestic energy. We also need to remember that long term intimacy is a rhythm, not constant fireworks. It takes a lot of work from both parties to ensure that long term partnerships really work out. Some see stability as boredom, which I can tell you it is not. Stability is calming and grounding. The growth we all need to progress through the stages of our lives now happens through maintenance, not necessarily pursuit. And yeah, fireworks are amazing, but as we get older, communication is valued more than simple chemistry. You can have chemistry with somebody, but their communication skills can be very, very poor. You can drop something and they just can't pick it up. I mean, it's just facts. Taking time to repair and discuss issues rather than the fantasy of it all. Talk. Because if you can repair these issues, if you can put into work, then it shows that you're willing to do these things for somebody that you truly care about. We value having shared values over shared tensions. I don't want to be mad about the same thing. I want to know that we are on the same page about a certain value or whatever the case is, right? And we want consistency rather than unpredictability. This does not mean that we need routine, absolutely not, because some people do not. But the stability and the consistency of it all is much better than knowing or not knowing how someone will react or what they'll do, etc. It takes a lot less energy because you're not constantly trying to figure out how to navigate that unpredictability. And truthfully, the slow burns don't actually end, but it deepens rather. It smolders, in my opinion. Now, what happens when we finally get the job? We enter that relationship we wanted, we see the recognition we've desired. Well, often the anxiety quiets, the questions soften, and the drama fades. We fear that call means something is missing. We experience sometimes FOMO, fear of missing out. And this is when anxiety can shift into vulnerability. This also opens us up to new fears, such as, am I good enough to do this? Am I enough? Why can't I do things? Look at Francesca and her fear for not being able to reproduce. And this is when we have to be brave enough to shift from the dreaming stage to essentially the just do it stage. Now, what does that mean? Well, in cases like Francesca, where she could not reproduce, she would have to say, you know what? She'd have to come to terms with that. John loved her for her. She lit up his world like fireworks. But he didn't need her to be anything but who she was. Does that make sense? And sometimes calm means something is secure. Now, we won't discount that achievement depression is a legitimate issue. Okay? But you do have to recalibrate your identity after a long pursuit. And essentially, you have to allow your nervous system to catch up to you. Because it's probably going to be wondering what the next chase is. And let's be fair, you may grieve the version of yourself that felt that longing. But you have to be brave enough to step into this new concept because arrival demands responsibility. Longing is romantic, absolutely. But season 4 teaches us that the end of longing is not the end of romance. It is the beginning of responsibility. Love is no longer imagined, it is practiced. It reminds us that maintenance is sacred. And there is such a beauty in completion. Completion is integration. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic, it's coherent. And yes, unfinished canvases are absolutely intoxicating, but finished ones, they can hang on walls, they can hold weight, they can endure, they can hold the truth. Benedict's arc closes not because mystery disappears, right? But because commitment replaces it. And commitment on its own is a kind of art. Benedict's growth isn't theoretical, and Sophie's belonging isn't conditional. They make the conscious choice to choose the same person daily, stand next to them proudly and publicly, and risk an ordinary life for the fantasy they once desired. But something even better about everything that they go through, right, is that their love story allows other people's stories to continue and flourish, right? So, how did that happen? Well, in Lady Alice, with Lady in Waiting to the Queen now and friend to Lady Danbury, she is now moving up in the world and finding her own voice as a lady in waiting, right? Lady Danbury is also in the midst of all this, dealing with her own thing, but because Lady Alice does her thing, I think the Queen is more comfortable and realizes that her best friend, Lady Danbury, is essentially made it so that she is not alone, which shows how much she cares about her. And it allows Violet, Mama V, to remember who she was prior to marrying her first husband and her love match and having her 8 kids and trying to help them navigate life. Now, don't get me wrong, I hate that Lord Marcus is a casualty of all of this, but it he had a part in it because of everything he learned that it wasn't impossible to love again, even if it doesn't always work out. And we didn't really talk about Penelope and Colin, but Penelope had to stand up for herself too. And because of Benedict, after watching everything, you can see she made it a point. So essentially, what we do affects other people. And that's something we have to remember. It can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing, it can be a neutral thing, but we do affect other people. And let's be fair. The end of an arc, the beauty of this completion is not lost on anybody. The only people who don't get to see it are the ones who refuse to see it. Buttercups, on the last episode, I asked you what you were waiting for. Well, today I ask you something different. What will you do when it arrives? Will you keep chasing the thrill of anticipation, or will you allow yourself to rest in the reality of what you have chosen? Every slow burn must eventually make a choice. Every liminal space must be crossed. Because the end of an arc is not the end of the story. It is simply the moment the character steps into who they were becoming all along. It is the calm after a period of longing. The canvas is no longer blank. It is complete. It is alignment. It is no longer a feeling of emptiness. And now, you get to live inside it. Love doesn't end at arrival. It begins again, quietly. Until next time. Buttercups, I thank you for listening and for being a part of this journey with me. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you have a great week ahead. Now, should you have any questions, comments, or, maybe future topics, you can email me at harktisthetebelle@gmail.com. You can locate me on Facebook, Spotify, and YouTube. And please remember that this is a one-woman show. So, as we go on this journey together, you are growing as I grow. But until next time, Buttercups.